3 weeks passed after the attack in the classroom, and Seojin's life at the academy had transformed in ways she could never have predicted. The official investigation concluded with a formal finding of self-defense, and the 4 Velthrani cadets received disciplinary marks on their permanent records. Calix was suspended for 1 full cycle, and his 3 accomplices were assigned to remedial courses on interspecies relations. Admiral Vethkaros had pushed back through diplomatic channels, but the security footage was too clear to dispute. Seojin walked the corridors differently now. Before the incident, other cadets had avoided her out of fear and prejudice. Now they avoided her out of respect. Some even nodded to her as she passed. Small gestures of acknowledgement from species that had never spoken to her before. The whispers still followed her, but the word monster had been replaced with words like warrior and survivor. She found it strange to be admired for violence, but she understood that the galaxy operated on different rules than Earth. Strength was the universal language that every species understood. The Alliance of Dawn met every cycle on the observation deck, and each meeting brought new faces. Word had spread through unofficial channels about a mixed species group that welcomed anyone willing to work for change. By the end of the 3rd week, their numbers had grown from 7 to 16. Tonight the group gathered for their regular training session. They had pushed the furniture to the edges of the room and marked a sparring circle on the floor. Seojin stood in the center while the others watched from the perimeter. The key to human combat is adaptability, she explained, demonstrating a basic defensive stance. We do not have claws or armored skin or venomous bites. We have only our minds and bodies and whatever tools we can create. So we learn to use everything available to us, including the environment itself. She gestured to Gromok, the Koroth warrior. Come at me. The massive fur being stepped into the circle. He towered over Seojin by nearly a meter and outweighed her by at least 200 kilograms. His thick muscles were designed for the high-gravity world where his species had evolved, making him one of the strongest cadets at the academy. I do not wish to hurt you, he rumbled. You will not, Seojin said with a small smile. But try anyway. Gromok lunged forward, his arms sweeping in to grab her in a crushing embrace. Seojin sidestepped at the last moment, caught his wrist, and used his own momentum to guide him past her. She added a slight twist that unbalanced him and sent him stumbling into the wall. The watching cadets murmured with surprise. Gromok was known as one of the best grapplers in his year. He had never been thrown so easily. I did not overpower him, Seojin explained to the group. I redirected his strength. On Earth, we have a saying, water is soft, but it can carve through stone. You do not have to be stronger than your opponent. You only have to be smarter. Gromok pushed himself off the wall with a deep laugh. On my world, we would call that cheating, but I see now why humans are so dangerous. You do not fight the way you look like you should fight. That is our greatest advantage, Seojin agreed. Every species expects us to behave like the Deathworld animals they imagine us to be. When we act differently, they do not know how to respond. The training session continued for another hour, with Seojin teaching basic techniques that could be adapted for different body types. Talonvar showed surprising aptitude for the joint locks, while Naratel struggled with the footwork but excelled at reading her opponent's intentions. Each member brought their own species' combat traditions to share, creating a fusion of styles that no academy instructor had ever seen when the session ended. The group dispersed in their usual small clusters. Seojin stayed behind with Talonvar, helping him reset the furniture and clean the floor. There is something I should tell you, the Morvathi said as they worked. I received word from a contact in the administrative office. Calix returns from his suspension tomorrow. Seojin paused but did not look up. I expected as much. He will not have forgotten what happened. His family's honor is at stake now, and the Velfrani take such matters very seriously. There are rumors that he has been training with a private combat instructor during his suspension, preparing for a rematch. Then let him come, Seojin said. I beat him once. I can beat him again. Telenvar set down the chair he was carrying and turned to face her. That is what I am afraid of. If you defeat him again, especially in front of witnesses, it will only escalate the conflict. The Velfrani will see it as a pattern of humiliation that demands a response. They might move beyond academy politics into something more permanent. Seojin understood what he was suggesting. Assassination was not common in the Galactic Union, but it was not unheard of either. Powerful families had eliminated troublesome individuals throughout history, usually in ways that could never be traced back to them. What would you have me do? She asked. Hide from him? Avoid confrontation? That would show weakness, which would be just as dangerous in its own way. No, Telenvar said. I want you to consider a different approach. One that shows strength without creating more enemies. Before he could explain, the door to the observation deck slid open. Seojin and Telenvar turned to see who had arrived and found themselves facing Commander Gel. The Dacian officer looked tired. His dark eyes moved across the room, taking in the rearranged furniture and the scuff marks on the floor. He did not seem surprised by what he saw. I wondered how long it would take you to start something like this, he said, looking at Sairin, a mixed-species training group operating in secret, recruiting cadets who are dissatisfied with the current system, teaching them human combat techniques. Seojin stepped forward. We are not breaking any regulations. No, you are not, Gal agreed, which is the only reason I have not reported you. But I came here tonight to give you a warning. The Velfrani ambassador has filed a formal complaint with the Union Council about your presence at this academy. He claims you represent a threat to cadet safety and should be expelled and returned to Earth. Seojin felt her stomach tighten. On what grounds? He claims you provoked the attack in the classroom through aggressive behavior and cultural insensitivity. He says the security footage was edited to remove the parts that show your provocation. He has 3 Velfrani witnesses who will testify to this version of events. That is a lie, Seojin said, her voice hard. Of course it is, but lies from an ambassador carry more weight than truth from a cadet. The council has agreed to hold a hearing in 3 days to consider the complaint. You will be required to appear and present your defense. Telenvar stepped up beside Seojin. She will not stand alone. The Alliance of Dawn will speak for her. Mughal looked at the young Morvathi with something like approval. I hoped you would say that, because a single human defending herself is easy to dismiss. But a group of cadets from multiple species standing together, that is much harder to ignore. He turned back to Seojin. 3 days. Prepare your case carefully. Present your allies wisely, and when you stand before the council, remember what you have learned here. You do not have to be stronger than your enemies. You only have to be smarter. The commander left without another word. The door slid shut behind him, and silence filled the observation. Seojin looked out at the nebula through the transparent walls. Tomorrow Calyx would return, hungry for revenge. In 3 days, she would face a hearing that could end her career and destroy everything humans had worked for in the Union. The challenges ahead were greater than anything she had faced before, but she was not alone anymore. She turned to Telenvar. Contact everyone in the Alliance. We need to meet as soon as possible. What are you planning? Seojin allowed herself a small smile. I am planning to show the galaxy what happens when a Deathworlder finds something worth protecting. She touched the fading scar on her arm, the last reminder of the 12 seconds that had changed everything. Those 12 seconds had been about survival. The battles ahead would be about something more important. They would be about building a future worth surviving for, and she would not stop fighting until the future became real. Seojin moved through the corridors of Convergence Prime like a shadow. The station was quieter at this hour, with most cadets asleep in their quarters and only skeleton crews manning the essential systems. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the walls, and the hum of the life support systems seemed louder in the silence. The coordinates led her to a section of the station she had never visited before. It was an observation deck near the outer ring, a place designed for contemplation and stargazing rather than training or administration. The door recognized her cadet authorization and slid open without resistance. She stepped inside and stopped. The observation deck was a large, circular room with transparent walls that looked out into the nebula. Purple and gold clouds of cosmic gas swirled in slow motion beyond the glass, casting strange colors across everything inside. The view was beautiful, but Seojin barely noticed it. Her attention was fixed on the beings waiting for her. There were 7 of them, arranged in a loose semicircle facing the door. They represented at least 5 different species. She recognized a Morvathi with pale blue skin, 2 Theshans with their large, dark eyes, a stocky creature covered in thick brown fur that she thought might be a Korath, and 3 others whose species she did not know. None of them were Velfrani. They watched her enter with expressions that ranged from curiosity to hope to barely concealed nervousness. No one moved to attack. No one seemed hostile, but Seojin kept her guard up anyway. "You came," the Morvathi said, stepping forward from the group. "I was not certain you would." Seojin studied him. He was young for his species, with smooth skin that had not yet developed the cracks of age. His uniform identified him as a cadet like herself. "4th year based on the markings. You sent the message," she said. "It was not a question, I did. My name is Telenvar. I apologize for the secrecy, but this meeting needed to happen away from watching eyes." "Why?" Telenvar glanced at the others before answering. "We've been observing you since you arrived at the academy, watching how you handle yourself, how you respond to the hostility and prejudice that follows you everywhere. Today we watched you face 4 enemies and defeat them without hesitation or fear. I was afraid," Seojin admitted. "I just did not let it stop me," the Morvathi smiled. "That is exactly why we wanted to speak with you." One of the Theshans stepped forward, a female with darker gray skin than Commander Bilal. "We represent a group of cadets who are tired of the old ways," she said. "The divisions and hatred between species, the politics that value ancient alliances over individual merit, the system that allows beings like Calyx to attack whoever they please because of their family connections. We want to change things," the Korath added, his voice a deep rumble like distant thunder. "We want to prove that cooperation across species lines is possible, that the Union can be more than a collection of factions constantly fighting for dominance." Seojin looked at each of them in turn. Reading their body language and expressions, they seemed sincere. But 3 months at the academy had taught her to be cautious. "Why do you need me?" she asked. "Because you are living proof of what we believe," Telenvar said. Humans were dismissed as savages and monsters, too dangerous and primitive to join civilized society. But here you are, excelling in your studies, following every rule, treating other species with respect, even when they treat you like an animal. You have shown more honor and discipline in 3 months than Calyx has shown in his entire life. I am just one person," Seojin said. "What I do does not change what others believe about my species. It has already started to change," the female Theshan said. "Do you know what people are saying about what happened today? They are not just talking about your combat skills. They are talking about how you could have killed all 4 of them, but chose not to. How you used exactly enough force to stop them and no more. How you stayed calm while they were screaming insults and threats." The Korath nodded his massive head. "On my world, that kind of control in battle is considered the highest form of warrior discipline. You have earned respect that most cadets never achieve. Seojin felt a strange mixture of pride and discomfort. She had not fought for respect or admiration. She had fought because it was the only choice available to her. But apparently, the manner of her fighting had sent a message she never intended. "What exactly do you want from me?" She asked. Telenvar exchanged glances with the others before speaking. "We want to form a new training group. A mixed species unit that operates outside the traditional faction system. We would train together, study together, and when the time comes, serve together. A living demonstration that species barriers are obstacles we choose to maintain, not natural laws we cannot overcome. And you want me to join this group? We want you to help lead it," the Marathi said. "Your example has already inspired cadets who were too afraid to speak against the current system. With your support, we can build something that lasts beyond our time at the Academy. Something that might actually change the galaxy." Seojin was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her father and the lessons he had taught her. She thought about Commander Gale and his warning about the enemy she had made. She thought about the long journey from Earth to this moment. All the obstacles she had overcome, just to stand here. She had come to the Academy to prove that humans belonged among the stars. She had expected to do that alone, fighting for every scrap of respect, one battle at a time. She had never imagined that others might want to fight alongside her. "If I join this group, it will make me an even bigger target," she said finally. "The Velthrani are already furious about what happened. If they see me gathering allies, they will see it as a threat and respond accordingly." "We know," Telenvar said. "We are willing to accept that risk. Are you?" Seojin looked out the transparent walls at the nebula beyond. Somewhere in that vast darkness was Earth. A world that had spent its entire history fighting for survival against impossible odds. Her people had never achieved anything by playing it safe. They had risen to dominance on their planet by taking risks that other species would consider insane. "I will not ask anyone to follow me into danger," she said, turning back to face the group. "I will not give orders or make decisions for others. If we do this, we do it as equals." Telenvar smiled and extended his hand in a gesture that Seojin recognized as a Morvathi sign of agreement. "That is exactly what we hoped you would say. Welcome to the Alliance of Dawn." Cadet Yoon Seojin reached out and clasped his hand. His skin was cool and smooth against her palm. "Why that name?" "Because every dawn begins with a single point of light breaking through the darkness," the female Deshan said. "We are that light, and the darkness will not be able to stop us." One by one, the other members of the group came forward to introduce themselves and offer their own signs of welcome. There was Naratel, the Deshan who had spoken earlier, and her brother Kostel. There was Grumuk, the massive Karth warrior with the gentle voice. There was Sil, a small glittering creature from a species that communicated partly through bioluminescence, and there were Ven and Tora, twins from a species called the Nalan, who had 4 arms each and could see in spectrums, invisible to most other beings. They were all different, all strange by human standards, but they had something in common. They were all willing to risk their futures on the belief that the galaxy could be better. "We meet here once every cycle," Telenvar explained. "To train, to study, to plan. We keep our activities secret for now, until we are strong enough to reveal ourselves publicly. Tomorrow, if you are ready, we would like to begin your integration into the group." Seojin nodded. "I will be here." The meeting broke up slowly, with members departing in small groups to avoid drawing attention. Soon only Seojin and Telenvar remained, standing together before the great window and the endless display of stars and cosmic dust beyond. "You asked why we needed you," the Morvathi said quietly. "But I think the truth is that you needed us too. No one can survive alone forever. Not even a Deathworlder. Seojin thought about those words as she made her way back to her quarters. She had spent 3 months at the academy feeling isolated and alone. Now she had allies, a cause, and something that felt almost like friendship. Her arms still ached beneath the bandages. A reminder of what her new path might cost, but for the first time since leaving Earth, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The medical wing of Convergence Prime was quiet and cold, filled with the soft hum of machines designed to treat injuries across 100 different species. Seojin sat on an examination table while a medical officer wrapped her wounded arm in synthetic bandages that would accelerate the healing process. The cuts were deep but clean. The Volfrani claws had sliced through skin and muscle without hitting any major blood vessels. She had been lucky, though luck had nothing to do with how she had positioned herself during the fight. The bleeding has stopped, the medical officer said. A gentle creature from a species Seojin did not recognize. The tissue regenerators will have you fully healed within 2 days. You should rest and avoid strenuous activity. Seojin nodded and flexed her fingers experimentally. Pain shot up her arm, but she kept her expression neutral. She had endured worse during training exercises on Earth. The door to the medical bay opened and Commander Gell entered, followed by 2 senior officers she did not know. One was a Velfrani in a formal military uniform. The other was a Deshan like Gell, but older and wearing the insignia of the Academy's Administrative Council. Cadet Yoon, Gell said, his voice carefully neutral. These officers need to speak with you about the incident. Seojin slid off the examination table and stood at attention. I am ready to answer any questions. The older Deshan stepped forward. I am Counselor Renvaros. I oversee disciplinary matters at this academy. This is Commander Vethsoren of the Velthrani Military Liaison Office. We have reviewed the security footage from the classroom and we have questions about your actions. I understand, Seojin said. The footage shows 4 Velthrani cadets approaching you after the instructor left the room. The counselor continued. It shows them extending their claws and making threatening statements. It then shows you incapacitating all 4 of them in approximately 12 seconds. Is this an accurate summary of events? Yes. The Velthrani commander leaned forward, his yellow eyes fixed on her with barely concealed hostility. The footage also shows you using excessive force against cadets who were merely attempting to confront you verbally. You broke bones. You caused a concussion. You nearly crushed the throat of one cadet who may have permanent damage to his vocal cords. Seojin met his gaze without flinching. They extended their claws before they said a single word. They surrounded me and cut off my escape routes. They attacked first. I responded with the force necessary to protect myself from 4 armed opponents. Armed? The commander scoffed. Their claws are natural parts of their bodies, not weapons. On my world, anything that can kill you is a weapon, Sekin replied. A tiger's claws are natural. A shark's teeth are natural. A snake's venom is natural. They are all still capable of ending a life. Your cadets came at me with natural weapons that could have opened my throat or pierced my heart. I treated them as the threat they were. The commander's scales flushed darker with anger, but Counselor Renvaros raised a hand to silence him. Cadet Yoon, are you saying you believed your life was in genuine danger? 4 Velthrani surrounded me, extended their claws, called me an animal, and attacked. I did not have time to determine whether they intended to kill me or merely maim me. I responded based on the threat presented. If that was wrong, then I apologize. But I will not apologize for surviving. The counselor studied her for a long moment. The footage supports your account. The Velthrani cadets clearly initiated the physical confrontation. Your response, while severe, appears to have been proportional to the immediate threat. Commander Vessarn made a sound of disgust. This is unacceptable. My nephew is lying in a medical bed with a fractured skull because of this creature. Admiral Vethkaros will demand justice. Sojin felt a cold wave of understanding wash over her. Calix was not just the son of an admiral. He was also the nephew of this officer. This was a family matter now. And that made it far more dangerous. Your nephew attacked an unarmed cadet with 3 accomplices, Gale said, speaking for the first time since introducing the officers. The footage is clear. If anyone should face justice, it is him and his companions. The Velthrani commander turned his glare on Galil. You defend this human because she is your project. Your experiment to prove that Deathworlders can be civilized. But we all know what she really is. A predator wearing the uniform of the Union. Today she attacked cadets. Tomorrow she will attack officers. This is what happens when you invite monsters into your home. Seojin felt her hands curl into fists at her sides, but she forced herself to remain still. Reacting would only prove his point. She had to be calm, controlled. Everything the Velthrani believed humans could not be. Commander Vethsoren. Counselor Renvaros said with a note of warning in his voice, I will not tolerate insults directed at any cadet under my jurisdiction. Human or otherwise, the security footage is conclusive. Cadet Yoon acted in self-defense against a coordinated assault. The 4 Velthrani cadets will face disciplinary proceedings for their actions. The Velthrani commander stared at the counselor with naked fury. This is not over, he said. The admiral will hear of this decision, and he will not let it stand. He turned and stormed out of the medical bay. The door slid shut behind him. With a soft hiss, Counselor Renvaros sighed and turned back to Seojin. You are cleared of wrongdoing, but I want you to understand that this incident will have consequences beyond what happened today. The Velthrani are proud, and they hold grudges. You have made powerful enemies. I did not choose to make enemies, Seojin said. I only defended myself. I know. But the result is the same. The counselor paused and studied her with something that might have been respect. 12 seconds against 4 armed opponents, without any weapons of your own. The combat instructors will be analyzing that footage for years. You may have just become the most famous cadet in Academy history. I do not want to be famous. Sometimes we do not get to choose what we become, the counselor said. Rest and recover, Cadet Yoon. The hard part is only beginning. She left with the medical officer, and Seojin was alone with Commander Go. He moved to stand beside her, his dark eyes troubled. She is right, he said quietly. Admiral Vethkaros is one of the most influential figures in the Velthrani military. He will push back against this decision with everything he has. Political pressure, diplomatic channels, possibly even threats against Earth's membership in the Union. All because I defended myself against his son? All because you won, Gel corrected. If you had lost, if his son had beaten you, there would be no scandal. The strong defeating the weak is expected, but a human defeating 4 Velthrani elite? That challenges everything they believe about their place in the galaxy. Seojin looked down at her bandaged arm. Then, what should I have done? Let them hurt me? No, Gel said firmly. You did exactly what you should have done. You survived, you won, and you did it without killing anyone, which shows more restraint than most warriors would manage in your situation. I am proud of you. Even if the universe makes that pride dangerous. Seojin felt something warm bloom in her chest at his words. She had spent so long feeling isolated and unwelcome at the academy. It meant something to know that at least one person was on her side. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait and see how the Velthrani respond. In the meantime, you continue your training as normal. You do not hide, and you do not apologize. You show everyone that humans belong here. No matter what anyone says. He placed a hand briefly on her uninjured shoulder. A gesture of support to cross the boundaries between their species. Then he left her alone in the medical bay. Saijin walked to the window and looked out at the nebula that surrounded the station. Purple and gold clouds of gas swirled in patterns that had taken millions of years to form. Somewhere in that vastness was Earth, her home. The world that had forged her into what she was. She had come here to prove that humans deserved their place among the stars. In 12 seconds of violence, she had made that point more clearly than words ever could. But the counselor was right. The hard part was only beginning that night, as she lay in her quarters trying to sleep. A communicator buzzed with an incoming message. She checked the screen and frowned. The sender was anonymous, and the message contained only two things: a set of coordinates somewhere in the station and a time. 2 hours from now, Seojin stared at the message for a long moment. It could be a trap, another attack from Velthrani seeking revenge. But something about it felt different. The attack had been public and clumsy. This was subtle and hidden. She made her decision. She would go, and she would see what awaited her. Because humans did not hide from the unknown. They walked toward it and faced whatever came. That was the Deathworld way. The Advanced Combat Theory classroom was shaped like a half circle, with rows of seats rising in tiers toward the back wall. Holographic projectors lined the ceiling and floor, ready to display tactical scenarios and battle simulations. It was one of the largest classrooms in the academy. Designed to hold over 100 cadets from a dozen different species, Seojin sat in her usual spot in the highest tier. Her back was against the wall, and she had a clear view of every entrance. The other cadets filled the seats below her, their voices creating a low hum of conversation in half a dozen languages that the translation system converted into a constant murmur. She watched the 4 Velthrani who had followed her. They had not taken seats together. Instead, they had spread out across the room. One sat near the main entrance. Another had positioned himself close to the emergency exit on the far wall. The third was in the middle rows among a group of other reptilian species. The fourth, the one with the dark green scales and cold eyes, sat only 3 rows below Seojin. She recognized him now. His name was Kelix, and he was the son of Admiral Vethkaros, one of the most powerful military commanders in the Velthrani fleet. Kelix had made his opinion of humans very clear during orientation week when he had publicly called Earth a breeding ground for savages. Seojin had not responded to the insult. She had simply walked away while her human classmates held her back. There were only 3 humans at the academy, and starting fights would only confirm what beings like Kelix already believed. The instructor entered the room, and the conversations faded into silence. Isental was a Morvathi, ancient by the standards of his species, with pale blue skin covered in fine cracks like old pottery. He moved slowly, but his mind remained sharp, and his lectures on combat theory were considered the finest in the academy. Today we discuss ambush tactics and response protocols, Isental announced as he activated the main display. The ambush is one of the oldest forms of warfare, used by every species that has ever waged conflict. The key to surviving an ambush is understanding that you are already at a disadvantage. The enemy has chosen the ground, the timing, and the method of attack. Your only advantages are speed of response and willingness to act. Seojin pulled out her datapad and began taking notes. But her attention remained divided between the lecture and the 4 Velthrani scattered around the room. She noticed small movements, glances exchanged between them, subtle shifts in posture. They were communicating without words, using body language that most species would not recognize. But Seojin had grown up on a death world. She had spent her childhood learning to read the intentions of predators. She knew what hunters looked like when they were preparing to strike. Isental continued his lecture, describing famous ambush from galactic history and the responses that had succeeded or failed. The minutes passed slowly. Each time Seojin looked at the Velthrani, they seemed to have moved slightly, Their positions were forming a pattern. Annette with her at the center, she considered her options. She could leave the classroom and report her suspicions to security, but she had no proof of anything, just a feeling in her gut that most officers would dismiss. She could confront Calix directly, but that would likely provoke exactly the incident he was hoping for. She could wait and see if she was wrong. Her father had taught her that instincts were survival knowledge, passed down through countless generations. He had told her to trust her gut because it contained the wisdom of ancestors who had lived and died learning to recognize danger. The lights in the classroom flickered once, twice, then steadied again. A voice came over the intercom announcing a minor technical malfunction in this section of the station. Maintenance crews were responding. Isenthal paused his lecture and looked up at the ceiling with obvious annoyance. "I will check with maintenance about this interruption," he said. "Review your notes until I return." He walked toward the main entrance and stepped out into the corridor. The door slid shut behind him. For a moment, nothing happened. The other cadets talked quietly among themselves or looked at their datapads. Seojin kept her eyes on Calix. He stood up. The three other Velthrani stood at the same moment. Their movements were synchronized in a way that showed careful planning. They had rehearsed this. They had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Calix turned to face Seojin, and his claws extended from his fingertips. Each claw was as long as a knife blade and sharp enough to cut through flesh with ease. The Velthrani were a predatory species, evolved from pack hunters on a world of endless forests and dangerous prey. "Human," Calix said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent room. "You do not belong here. You are an animal pretending to be civilized. And today we will remind you of your place." The other three Velthrani were moving up the tiers toward her. Their claws were also extended. Their yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation. The other cadets scrambled out of their way, some fleeing toward the exits while others pressed against the walls to watch. Seojin stood slowly. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. Adrenaline flooded her system, sharpening her senses and slowing her perception of time. This was the gift of her Deathworld heritage, the ability to function at peak performance when death was close, 4 against 1. She said, her voice calm, "Is this what passes for courage among the Velthrani?" Calix hissed, a sound of pure hatred. "It is pest control." They attacked. The first one came from her left, lunging with claws aimed at her throat. He was fast by galactic standards. But Seojin had grown up in Earth gravity. Her muscles were dense and powerful, her reflexes honed by years of training against the most dangerous creatures on a death world. She was already moving before he reached her. She dropped low, bending her knees and pivoting on her heel. The claws swept through empty air where her neck had been a heartbeat before. She struck upward at his knee joint, a vulnerable spot where the scales were thinner and the tendons more exposed. She felt something crack under her palm. He screamed and collapsed. Clutching his leg, the second and third Velthrani came at her from the front. They had learned from their companion's mistake and attacked together. Coordinating their strikes to cut off her escape routes, Seojin grabbed her datapad from the desk and threw it at the face of the one on the right. He flinched and raised his arm to block, which was exactly what she wanted. She closed the distance to the one on the left, getting inside his reach where his long claws became a liability rather than an advantage. She drove her palm into his throat, a precise strike to the soft tissue beneath his jaw. He staggered backward, gagging and choking. Unable to breathe, the third one recovered and slashed at her. She tried to dodge, but the space was too tight. His claws raked across her left forearm, opening 3 deep cuts that immediately began to bleed. Pain flared through her arm, but she pushed it away. Her body released more adrenaline in response to the injury, dulling the pain and flooding her muscles with energy, another gift from Earth. the ability to ignore wounds that would incapacitate other species. She caught his extended arm before he could pull it back, twisted it at the elbow until she felt resistance, then used his own momentum to throw him over her hip and into a desk. The impact made a sound like breaking wood, and he did not get up. 12 seconds had passed since the first attack. Only Calyx remained standing. He looked at his 3 companions on the ground, and for the first time, Seojin saw something other than hatred in his eyes. She saw fear, but he was too proud to retreat. He charged at her with a roar, his claws slashing in wide arcs that forced her to back away. He was bigger than the others, better trained, more experienced. He had clearly been studying combat since childhood. Seojin let him drive her backward until her shoulders touched the wall. Then she stopped retreating. Calyx lunged for the kill. Certain that he had her trapped, she was not trapped. She was exactly where she wanted to be. She baited his strike by leaving an opening in her guard. When he committed to the attack, she stepped to the side and let his claws tear through empty air and scrape against the wall before he could recover. She drove her elbow into his temple with all the force her gravity-hardened bones could deliver. Calyx dropped like a stone and did not move. Seojin stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, her blood dripping onto the floor. The other cadets stared at her in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The door opened, and Isental walked back in with 2 security officers behind him. They stopped at the sight before them. 4 Velthrani cadets lay groaning or unconscious on the floor. A single human stood among them, wounded but victorious. The old Morvathi instructor looked at the scene with his ancient eyes and asked the only question that mattered: what happened here? Seojin wiped the blood from her arm and met his gaze without flinching. They attacked me, she said. I defended myself. It was the truth, simple and complete. It was also the moment that everything changed. Yoon Se-jin walked through the curved corridors of Convergence Prime, with her head held high and her eyes scanning every shadow. Every species she passed either stared at her with open curiosity or looked away with barely hidden fear. She was human, and in this galaxy, that word carried weight that most beings could not understand. The Galactic Union Military Academy floated in the heart of a brilliant nebula, a massive station where the children of 100 worlds came to train as soldiers and peacekeepers. Seojin had been here for 3 months now, and she was still the subject of whispers that followed her like ghosts. She entered the xenobiology lecture hall and took her seat in the middle row. The chairs were designed to accommodate dozens of body types, and she adjusted the settings until the seat fit her frame. Around her, cadets of various species settled into their places. A group of Velthrani occupied the back rows, their scaled bodies gleaming under the artificial lights. One of them, a male with dark green scales and cold yellow eyes, stared at her without blinking. Seojin ignored him. She had learned that lesson in her first week. Professor Kethvaros entered the room on 6 segmented legs, his insectoid body towering over most of the students. His compound eyes swept across the class before he activated the holographic display at the front of the room. Today, we continue our study of extreme adaptation, he announced. His voice translated through the universal system into a flat mechanical tone. We will examine a species that should not exist according to standard evolutionary models. An image appeared on the display. It was Earth, blue and green and swirling with white clouds. Seojin felt her chest tighten. The human homeworld is classified as a Category 7 Deathworld, Kethvaros continued. This is the second highest danger rating in our classification system. The planet features extreme gravitational pull, an atmosphere containing highly reactive oxygen, severe temperature variations, and an ecosystem dominated by predatory life forms. Murmurs rippled through the classroom. Seojin kept her expression neutral even as she felt dozens of eyes turn toward her. The humans evolved under these conditions for millions of years. the professor said. Their bodies are dense with muscle fiber adapted to high gravity. Their cardiovascular systems can sustain intense physical activity for extended periods. They possess a chemical response system that floods their bodies with performance-enhancing hormones during moments of danger. The Velthrani in the back whispered, something that made his companions hiss with laughter. Seiyojin caught the word monster, but pretended she had not heard. Perhaps our human cadet can provide some insight, Kethvaro said, turning his compound eyes toward Seiyojin. Tell us about the predators of your world. Seiyojin stood slowly. She could feel the attention of the entire class pressing against her like a physical force. Earth has many predators, she said, keeping her voice calm and steady. Large cats that can run faster than most ground vehicles. Bears that stand 3 meters tall and can break bones with a single strike. Sharks that smell blood from kilometers away. Venomous snakes and spiders and insects. Bacteria and viruses that have killed billions of my people throughout our history. The classroom had gone very quiet. How did your species survive? A Morvathi cadet asked from the front row. Genuine curiosity in his voice. We learned to be more dangerous than anything that hunted us, Seiyojin replied. We made tools and weapons. We formed groups and protected each other. We refused to die. She sat down. The professor nodded his angular head and continued the lecture. But Seiyojin noticed that the other cadets kept glancing at her. Some looked impressed. Others looked afraid. The Velthrani in the back looked angry after the lecture ended. Seiyojin gathered her datapad and headed for the door. She was halfway down the corridor when her communicator buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Commander Gale, her assigned mentor at the Academy, Cadet Yoon. Please come to my office when your schedule permits. There are matters we need to discuss. Seiyojin changed direction and made her way to the administrative section of the station. Commander Gale was a Deshan, a tall bipedal species with smooth gray skin and large dark eyes. He had been assigned to oversee her integration into the academy, and he was one of the few officers who treated her with genuine respect. She pressed the entry request on his door and waited until it slid open. Come in, Jiao said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Sit down, please. Seiyojin sat and waited. She had learned that Gale preferred to organize his thoughts before speaking. There have been complaints filed against you, he said finally. Nothing formal yet. But several cadets have expressed concerns about having a human in their training groups. I have not harmed anyone, Seiyojin said. I know that. The complaints are about your presence, not your actions. Some species find humans deeply unsettling. Your endurance, your pain tolerance, your predatory instincts. These things frighten them. Seiyojin said nothing. This was not news to her. There is also a political element, Gale continued. Certain factions within the Union believe that humans should never have been granted membership. They see your species as a threat. A young and aggressive civilization that will upset the balance of power. We just want to be part of the galaxy. Seiyojin said quietly, I believe you. But not everyone does. Gale leaned forward, his dark eyes serious. I want you to be careful. There are cadets here who would like nothing more than to see you fail, or to give you a reason to be expelled. Do not give them that satisfaction. Seiyojin nodded slowly. I understand. Good. You are dismissed. She left his office and headed toward her next class. The corridors were busy with cadets moving between lectures and training sessions. Seiyojin walked with purpose, her eyes forward. Her posture relaxed, but alert. She did not notice the 4 Velthrani, who fell into step behind her until she had almost reached the lecture hall. When she glanced over her shoulder, they stopped and pretended to be engaged in conversation. But their yellow eyes followed her until she disappeared through the doorway. Seiyojin found her usual seat near the back of the Advanced Combat Theory classroom. From here, she could see both entrances and most of the other students. It was a habit her father had taught her during the long years of training on Earth. Always know your exits, he had told her. Always know who is in the room with you. Always be ready. Her father had been a soldier before he became a farmer. He had survived 3 wars and countless smaller conflicts. When the Galactic Union made contact with Earth and offered membership, he had encouraged Sojin to apply for the military academy. Show them what humans can do, he had said. Show them that we are more than our reputation. She intended to do exactly that. No matter what obstacles appeared in her path, the instructor had not yet arrived, and cadets were still filtering into the room. Sojin watched them come, cataloging faces and positions out of habit. When the 4 Velthrani from the corridor entered and spread out to different sections of the classroom, she felt the first cold touch of warning in her gut. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones, but she stayed in her seat and waited. Because a human did not run from shadows. A human faced whatever came and dealt with it. That was what her world had taught her. That was what she would show them all.